Hello everybody, I got a lot of things running in the shop right now, and so I thought I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about a common problem of hooking up complicated system is the ground loop noise. And I just want to tell you that I have 3 integrated amps, 3 preamps, and all 3 preamp has a separate power supply. 1 integrated amp, 2 integrated amp actually have a separate power supply, and then a mixed bag of capacitor pack hook up into this the whole system here. 1 power amp is behind this tall rack, and one of the preamps is actually hooked up to a step-up transformer because it's a 240 volt unit. A mixed bag of balance and single-ended cable. A DA converter is actually off on that side with the computer running streaming music. One of the preamps is actually over there too, and running 3 pairs of speaker, and there is no ground loop noise. And I'm going to turn on some music to show you it is running. So it is running with music. Okay, so turn it back down. I am going to take the camera off and stick the mic into 3 of the woofer, so you know it is running music and there is no noise. And let me show you. Turn on the music a little bit, so to show you this is the. Let me hold this camera and the mic together. Now music is running. Oh, track just stopped. Come on. Waiting for more music. There. Okay. I will turn on the music. And then the next one. Whoops. Step on the wire. The mic still work? Yep, the mic still work. Then the next one. Now the little noise that you're probably hearing right now is the fan. This is the fan. Okay. So that is the power amp, the fan from the power amp. Okay, I am going to go back to the front now. Try not to step on the wire. Now, I am going to show you one of the main reasons that this system is quiet with no ground loops is because I hook up everything to this power outlet. Turn on the light. Yeah. This is the one on the wall. I hooked everything up to this power outlet. Now this is a 20 amp outlet, and even if it is a 15 amp outlet, it's okay, because even though I have so many things in there, I do not crank it up. If I do crank it up, 5-6 amps maximum. And how loud you going to crank it up? I'm not running 1,000 watt out of any of the amps, so it's 15 amps is more than plenty. Now let bear with me that there are audiophiles that don't want to plug everything into the same outlet, which is okay. That there are other solutions that you can do to avoid that problem. But what I'm telling you that to avoid ultimate ground loops, one of the best solutions is plug everything into the same outlet. Now you can actually run 20 power bar like I do. I run a power bar out here. That's the 10 outlet power bar right there. Okay, run from there, run from that outlet, and then run an extension cord to this side of the DA converter, and that's the DA converter. This is DA converter, that's another preamp, that's a computer. Now we can discount the computer because the computer is basically not connected, doesn't have a ground path between the computer and the DA converter because it has isolation transformer. But I will explain why the isolation transformer avoid the ground in other cases. In this case, the PC, the computer is basically not. It is electrical connected signal coupling, but it's coupling through a transformer which breaks the ground, and it helps avoid ground loop. So that's the first things you can do to avoid ground loop when you build a system. Okay, now audiophile then say that I need more than 115 amp, more than 120 amp. Yes, I do agree. Sometimes you do need them. Sometimes you cannot avoid that. using just one outlet. So before I go back too far on how to avoid ground loop, and let me start by saying how to identify ground loop. And let me untangle this wire. While I'm doing it, I'm going back to my notes, and because I don't want to forget anything. Now, first of all, ground loop is not caused by particular component, not a single one. Ground loop is a system noise. And system noise meaning like you have multiple components, at least 2 or more. And ground loop is usually caused by having a signal ground between each component, and then having the earth ground, aka chassis ground. When I say that 2 words is equal at this point, they have 2 ground paths, and one for the signal path, let's put it up there, and one for the ground path, let's put it down there. When you have 2 grounds in between 2 components, that is possibly that have a loop. Within a system, it's not so much, but there are designer engineer will tell you that if the ground designed properly, you will not have ground loop. In theory, they are correct, but in practical, you cannot avoid to buy all components that have the same ground scheme to match. It's just not possible. So it's not a practical solution or practical thinking even to have all components that have the same ground scheme. So now how to identify ground loop? Ground loop is usually not hum. The soft hum is not caused by ground loop. Soft hum is caused by the component designed that way, and soft hum to them is actually acceptable. So I can go into details in another video, but that is not a ground loop. Ground loop is usually a buzz. A buzz have a little bit of hiss, but that not a pure hiss. Pure hiss is like tube hiss, that's normal. But buzz is like zzz, like that. That is a sharp fundamental frequency, which is 50 hertz or 60 hertz, and then a even harmonic, 120 hertz, 120 hertz and 240 hertz and so on and so forth, and 100 hertz or 200 hertz on the other side of the world. So when you have that buzz, that's usually caused by ground loop. And let me go back to this, and on the okay, now solving ground loop. Once you identify that's a ground loop problem, assuming you identify that's a ground loop problem, so you want to break the loop. That's a theory. You want to break the loops. And how do you break the loops? And let me tell you something that you do not want to do first. Okay. First of all, you do not want to buy expensive ground box or even a cheap ground box. Any kind of audiophile ground box will not help you solve ground loop. Second, any kind of ground cable. You do not need to buy any audiophile ground cable. If you buy any kind of ground cable that try to solve ground loop, you are wasting your time. You are only helping the transfer of your money from your wallet to their wallet. In fact, if you do need one more piece of cable for ground, you can go to Home Depot and buy a piece of hookup wire. Any kind of hookup wire, 18 gauge or bigger, is good enough for at least testing. You do not need to buy audiophile ground cable. Did I tell you that I do or do not believe audiophile ground cable then? Make your decision then. Anyway. Okay, so those are the things that you do not want to do at first or even at last when you have a ground loop problem. Because when you have ground loop, you usually have too many ground, not enough ground. So how to solve ground loop? To solve ground loop, or at least find out what caused the ground loop, is to disconnect everything from in between them and from the wall, from the AC outlet. Then one thing at a time, hook up one thing at a time. If you have an integrated amp, hook up the integrated amp. If you have a preamp power, hook up just the power amp, not the preamp. So let me start with power amp. Power amp and integrated amp, let's call it the same thing for now. Hook up either one of them, a power amp, to the speaker, turn it on. And if that's quiet, then your power amp is okay. There is something called the internal ground loop. Internal ground loop is caused by rather insignificant, inefficient design of the component internally within the metal box. And don't be surprised, there's a lot of component out there that has internal ground loop issues. And I am sadly to say that I have seen component that's supposed to be made by companies that have been around for 10, 15, 20 years, sold for thousands of dollars and go around the world, and that actually still have a ground loop issues, and they sold for thousands of dollars. And may I say the consumer has been brainwashed by the manufacturer, or other means that those noises are normal. No, they are not. They are not normal. So if they cannot solve that noise, the buzzing noise, that is just incompetent design. I don't want to go too far into that, but I will. Well, it's not fair for me to say that I would not buy the product because I haven't bought anything for a long time. Why should I? Anyway, so I have recently seen one of them, and it's sad to actually know that somebody actually sell that thing for $3,500 US and separate power supplies and all that, and have a rookie mistake of internal ground loop. And I'm going off tangent a little bit, but bear with me. A misconception is when you have a separate power supply, it's automatically quiet. Wrong. No, it's not. This component actually have a separate power supply, and it is because of the lack of knowledge of routing the correct ground way. That's what ground loop. That's what caused the ground loop. And in this case, they have one not enough ground wire hooked up, and it's not so much about where it hooked up, it's how it's hooked up. So I solved that problem. I charge a fair price and move on. But I'm just so disappointed to see that still so many out there, they are willing to just send it out halfway around the world and have any kind of conscience. I guess I'm getting old and stupid. Anyway, so where was I? I was helping you to solve ground loop problem. Hook up the amp. If the amp have quiet, have a little bit of hiss is okay, but it should not have buzz. If it's quiet, you hook up a preamp. In the integrated amp case, that you skip this part because you don't have a preamp. So you hook up the preamp, turn it on again. If that's quiet, then you hook up. Now, if it's not quiet, then you need to look at individual components and see that's caused by each one. But assuming it's quiet, then you hook up individual source one at a time. Let's say you have a CD player, hook it up to the preamp or integrated amp now. Hook it up, quiet, take it off, completely take it off. Okay, and then streamer, hook it up. If it's quiet, take it off. And then phono stage, quiet, take it off. Anything else, quiet, take it off. Until you try out everything that you have. If none of them actually cause the noise as soon as you hook it up, if it does, then you can isolate that one might have a problem of a compatible problem of ground of your system. But if none of them actually make the ground loop noise when you hook it up, then your ground loop noise is a combination. So therefore, none of those are actually at fault. Then you hook up any one of those again. Let's say a CD player, hook it up again, quiet, this time stay there. And hook up the second one and see that it's quiet or not. If it's quiet, stay there. Hook up the third one. If it's quiet, stay there. Then hook up the fourth one. If it's noisy, take it out. And assuming you have a fifth one, hook up the fifth one and see what happens. If it's quiet, stay. So now you know that the fourth one may be the cause of combination. It's not compatible with the ground system. So is it that fault? Probably not. Because if that one is not causing the noise in other system, it's only causing to you in your system, it's a combination, it's compatibility problem. It's not necessarily a component fault. Now how do you find out that Possibly it's a component fault, but not necessary, okay? Possibly. You hook up that noisy one back and let it noisy. Now, when you do all these tests, keep your volume control at the minimum, because ground loop doesn't cause by volume, it's not volume dependent. You can turn it up, it will not get louder. There are occasions that it will get louder, but those are different kind of ground loop. It's not this kind of ground loop that caused by the earth ground and the signal ground combined. So hook up the noisy one. If you turn it up, if it's not volume dependent, then you know it's definitely a ground loop. But if volume dependent, it can be still a ground loop, or it can be the residual noise from the component. But this video is not long enough to cover everything, so let's stay back to just cover the ground loop, not volume dependence. So when you have that component hooked up to the system and cause the noise, you want to break the ground connections. Just one ground, you have to have signal ground connected, and that component, let's say that component is a tape deck. A tape deck, the chassis ground of the tape deck still has to connect the ground for safety at all time. But the signal ground can be break away from the earth ground, and that's how you separate the ground, the chassis ground and signal ground, to break the ground loop. In many of my components, and actually currently in all my components except the DA converter, it has the ground lift switch. A lot of professional equipment has the ground lift switch. What they call ground lift switch, is really not lifting the ground. It's actually disconnecting the signal ground and the earth ground, also called chassis ground. So the chassis remain connected to earth ground at all times for safety. The signal ground disconnected from the earth ground, chassis ground. Now, there are rare occasions that the chassis ground can be disconnected from the system, but that is not something that you should do at home. I strongly recommend it not to do that at home. Professional does that. Some professional does that for testing or even permanent installation, but when those rare occasional occur, there are other means that actually that chassis ground is permanently connected to the earth for safety. But that is not something that you should even think about it at home. I know that a lot of people use cheater plug to solve the ground loop problem. I know it works, but I do not recommend it unless you actually know what you're doing. I cannot assume that you know what you're doing when you're watching this video. So therefore, do not do that. If you've seen anybody do that, it's not your problem. I would recommend not. Find other solutions, and there are other solutions you can find. So let's not drill into that, but I do not recommend that you use cheater plug. And if you have to do it, find a professional and do it right, and they will find other solution. Or if they have to use that, they will make sure the chassis is grounded to earth for safety. It's not something that you should do. So anyway, go back to solving ground loop problem. And if you have an all balance system, there are cable out there that have the shield and pin 1 ground not connected to both ends, and that will actually solve 90% of the problem if you have a fully balanced system. Now, there are occasions that you have a mixed bag of single end and a balanced cable, but you can still possibly break a ground on one of the balanced cable that actually can solve the problem. So that's a combination of all kinds. It's not enough to cover all the situation in this one short video. A 500-page book's probably not even going to cover everything, every situation. You just have to understand the concept and then go with it. So there are signal coupling transformer that you can use in the signal path, and that's available in single-ended and balanced, and you can actually break the signal ground instead of the earth ground. So one of the ground that you have to break if you have a ground loop problem, either the signal ground or the earth ground, the easiest way to break is to disconnect the signal ground from the earth ground. That will be the easiest way, the cleanest way, because if you insert any kind of signal coupling transformer in the signal path, it will alter the sound. For some people, that's not as pure, but for some people, it might help, but it will solve your ground loop problem, but it will alter your sound. So that's the various solution that you can do at home that's fairly safe. Don't use Jitterbug. Okay, don't do that. And if you have a good ground loop noise, that's best way to troubleshoot it. Yep. Okay, I said that before, and that's not possible. If all is not possible and no ground lift switch you can actually use, mine have all ground lift switch, and a lot of cases I don't even have to use it. And good ground lift switch, you can actually use it while the music is playing, while the system is turned on, because then you can instantly hear the difference. In most cases, in my hookup here, because I'm using a single outlet. Now, if you're using a multiple outlet, it may cause ground loop. But if you're using a single wall outlet, most likely you do not have a ground loop, and those ground loop switch you can go up and down, disconnect or connect. It won't make any difference. So, and then the last one, I told you about not what to buy, and if okay, the last, if all possible solution that you can do at home it doesn't work and you have to find somebody to help you, let me try to tell you what not to get help first. First of all, salespeople. I do know salespeople that actually know how to solve ground loop, but that's rare. But there are many salespeople that know how to sell stuff to you, but they do not know how to solve ground loop. And be very careful that some salespeople, they have smooth talker, and they might able to talk you into that, believe them they can sell soft ground loop, but they can't. So that's something that you got to be aware of, and is, I don't know, I just have that smell that I can smell those things 10 miles away. Sometimes I don't even want to have that, but it's just me. So anyway, salespeople that doesn't have any technical knowledge and you want to avoid, but I also understand that there's a lot of salespeople that doesn't have any technical knowledge, that to a lot of people that they think they do, but they don't. So be aware of that. So if you want to avoid that at all, just don't go to a store where you buy from and then ask for help with ground loop. And now, there are good store owners, there are good store salespeople, and those people will refer you to actually technical people. Now, technical people, you find technical people to help you. The type of technical people to help you or not able to help you, and don't waste your time, are the engineers. Engineers, I have been talking to engineers, I have been working with engineers, lots of them. They will throw theory at you, and I have talked to a few engineers that actually asked them about ground loop issues and ground loop problem, internal and external. Well, they throw a lot of theory at me, and a lot of them don't work. I don't know the percentage, I don't remember the percentage, but I can tell you that a lot of them just doesn't work. They will tell you if the ground is designed and connect properly, it will not have ground loop. What the heck does that mean? So what does it mean by design properly? How do a consumer, from a consumer point of view, how do you know the equipment ground is designed properly? The reputation of the brand doesn't mean anything, because the reputation of the brand has been so diluted and washed by marketing department. There is no brand, including me, that you should trust, unless it's proven otherwise. And there are so many brands that's somewhat proven, but they are actually just like covered with more marketing crap. So what I tell you so far, you should not trust until you have confirmation. So I don't know where you get the confirmation, but I'm just telling you that what I know. I do not claim that I know everything about ground loop. I just tell you what I know. So engineers, skip them. They're going to waste your time. And don't waste their time either. They have better things to do. Two types of people that you can actually get help. One type of people are expensive and difficult to find. The other one is more available. The first one is recording studio technician / electrician. They know how to make things quiet. They don't ask them for theory. They might not able to tell you, but they know what to do to make things quiet. But those people are not necessarily, they install a lot, they build a lot, they know how to avoid ground loop to begin with. But solving ground loop is not necessarily all the time is their choice, because they build things from ground up. But If they have to solve it, they can get it done. But those are expensive, difficult to find. I have a lot of respect for them for what they do, but they are just expensive and difficult to find. The other type of people that's easier to find, as more cost effective, as more affordable, I should say, are the audio video installer. Why are they more affordable? Because they get more of them, and they install a lot of audio video system, and they need to know how to solve ground loop if there's one, just like studio electrician. No, okay. Make sure that you do not get electrician. Okay, do not get electrician, because normal electrician don't know anything about ground loop. It has to be related to audio, especially audio, somewhat video, but video can cause trouble by ground loop, but not as much as audio, because audio you can hear it. For a normal electrician, 60 hertz is necessary because that's what they deal with. 60 hertz or 50 hertz is necessary. That's what they deal with. But ground loop is not their concern. They hook up the power. There you go. So unless you know your outlets are coming from the same phase on the same side of the panel, multiple outlets coming from the same side of the panel, it's possible that your house, even with two outlets side by side, they coming from separate side of the panel. Because when the normal electrician hook those things up, they want to balance things out, knowing that you're going to use a lot of energy, not a lot of power from one room, hook up to the outlet side by side. So they want to draw the electricity from both sides of the panel, so to balance things out, so they don't just lopside on the one side of the transformer. But when that happen, big ground loop problem happen. Now, the electrician would just say it's 120 volt. What's the big deal? But it's not. So you have to find people that actually have AV installer. Those AV installer understand ground loop is not acceptable. Ground loop cause problem. How to solve ground loop? Now I'm not going to go into how they solve ground loop, but those are the people that you can get help. They might cost 120 bucks an hour, but they might come in for just an hour or half an hour. They can solve the problem instead of you spending 5, 6, 7 hours to try to solve a problem. Now, I don't even remember in the earlier video did I tell you that not to buy to solve ground loop, but let me do this again if I don't. There are things that you do not want to buy, you do not want to spend money, and there are also other places that you do not want to spend time. Don't bother to spend a lot of time to find information. Things that you don't want to buy when you have ground loop. Assuming you identify there's a ground loop problem, the things that you don't want to buy. Audiophile ground box, audiophile cable, don't buy them. Useless. The place that you do not expect to find useful information is the cesspool, aka internet. Now there are very, very useful information in the cesspool, but you need to know how to swim around the useless, find the right turd, and even when you find the right turd, it still stinks. You need to know how to wash the turd to get the information. And in order to do that, you need to have good swimming skill. And that good swimming skills means you need to have good background knowledge and information in order to find that right turd, because the cesspool are so stink and it just waste of time when you ask a question. And that is exactly why I do this video, because I have seen so many people asking how to solve ground loop, and they get all kinds of useless information from safe but useless, safe but and sometimes safe and useful. Rarely that's the right turd that you still have to wash it, and there's dangerous and useless, and that's dangerous and useful. So you have to be able to find that, and even if you find that, you need to know how to apply that information to your problem. Again, I am telling you what I know for the past many years that I have solved ground loop and helped people solve ground loop, and I have solved so many customers that solve ground loop problem on the phone, in person, on locations, by email. On locations, that's the easiest way. But that's the easiest way to find ground loop, but that's not the easiest way for me to travel there. I usually don't like to travel to waste hours and hours and spend 15 minutes off a ground loop and come back. I don't want to waste that much time. So in most cases, I actually help people solve ground loop via email. But the common mistake that consumers make when asking people to solve ground loop problem is they give a lot of rather useless information or missing information and dance around the question being asked. Okay, first of all, missing information. Ground loop. The person to help you, they have to assume that you know absolutely nothing about ground loop because they don't know you, unless they know you. But let's assume that they don't know you. They have to ask you the basic information. Did you turn on the amp? Did you turn on any equipment? How your system hook up? Those are absolutely essential information that you have to tell them one by one. What cable did you use? Okay, what input did you use? Sometime to that point, what input did you use? Those are essential information. You must tell them very clearly, one by one. Those are not useful. Those are not useless. Very useful for the troubleshooter. Not for you. Maybe not for you, but for the troubleshooter, it's very, very useful. You need to tell them. So second, they will ask you, is it come from both channel or one channel? Usually it's my first question. Come from one channel or both question. Don't dance around. Just tell them one or two. Now, I have recently helped somebody to solve a problem, and when I ask them, is the problem coming from one channel or two channel? And he just say, it doesn't play music. No, just answer my question, please. One channel or two channel? Is one channel no music or two channel no music? Or the other way? Just answer the question exactly the way it's been asked. Because as soon as you dance around, as soon as you actually let the troubleshooter has to second guess, has to assume something, that assumption can accumulate to the end, which is wasting everybody's time. So answer the question directly as possible. Don't dance around and don't do any missing information. And try to communicate, especially in email or message nowadays, in point form. Don't write long sentences, just in point form. When they've been asked a question, answer that question directly. And those questions should not be that difficult. Just how did you hook up? And they will, if a competent troubleshooter, they will help you ask by one or two channel. Okay, and assuming there's a ground loop, then they ask you, what component do you have? List out everything you have. Now, sometimes they want you to list it out yourself, and sometimes they will ask you one by one. Do you have an integrated amp? Do you have a preamp power amp? Let's go from there. And how many other things you have? And sometimes they ask you what model. And there are times when as soon as you ask you what model, they know that model has specific ground loop problem. And there, if an experienced troubleshooter will just tell you that, okay, that's all they need to know. Then, and they will either give you solutions or give you a suggestion. So AV installer is my most respected source for solving ground loop. If you try everything else that you cannot, it doesn't help to solve a ground loop problem. But if you're building a system, there are ways that you can actually avoid ground loop. It's first of all, hook up everything to one outlet. If you cannot, make sure those multiple outlets are on one side of the panel. But if you live in an apartment, condo, or houses that you cannot build a system, then there are other ways that you can do to solve ground loop. So if that's happened, it's not the end of the world. There are ways to solve ground loop problem. So anyway, I am going to cut the video now because I will be start mumbling and the battery will run low. And this is actually take 3 because I forget a couple of very important things in the last 2 takes. Actually, I forget tell you what not to buy and what not to do. So those are the important things because those will waste your time. And again, if you have somebody to actually help you solve the ground loop problem, make sure you answer the question as exactly and direct as possible. And that was one of the reasons that I don't talk to consumer anymore directly, because when I try to help them, they dance around. I don't know they're being polite or not able to answer my question directly, but that is very frustrating. I don't get the answer directly. How am I going to help you? So that the email can drag longer and longer and longer and longer. A simple solution that can drag longer and longer. And also, ground loop is a ground loop. It doesn't hurt anything. It's ground loop. Don't make it dramatic, okay? So just a ground loop. It's a bus. No big deal. So I have occasion of two people that's like, screaming loud hum. No, it doesn't scream. It just ground loop. Okay, so don't make it dramatic, because that also confuse the person that actually help you, because the loud hum or loud bus, quiet hum and quiet bus, they're four different things. When you have a loud bus, that means you're missing ground. It's a lot of times you're missing ground. But if you have a bus that's quiet, you have too many grounds. So the level of noise can identify the problem. So don't exaggerate. Try to be calm and tell what it is. Okay, again, second time, I gotta shut this video off because again, too long. There are other topics that I can cover with complete video, but I don't want to whine too long. So anyway, stay safe. Bye!